Joining me now to look at the week in politics are parliamentary reporter Tonda MacCharles from the Toronto Star and Robert Fife, the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda, Bob, thank you for joining us on Primetime Politics.
You're welcome.
Hey, Mark.
Tonda, let's start with you. And as we know, there are groups that are holding marches and rallies in Ottawa this weekend. Freedom Fighters Canada marching on Parliament Hill, and the Rolling Thunder Bikers Convoy gathering near the National War Memorial on Saturday. All of this as the public inquiry into the government's use of the Emergencies Act during February's trucker convoy has gotten underway. So, Tonda, do you think the government has made its case for the use of the Emergencies Act?
Well, to be clear, the inquiry hasn't actually gotten underway, and that's the whole point of it, isn't it? To discover if, in fact, the government did make its case and was able to meet the threshold in the law, which is that other laws weren't available to deal with the situation. And that's the whole crux of what we're going to see Justice Paul Rouleau unfold. But he hasn't yet named, to my knowledge, a commission counsel, and all of sort of set up the structure to get the hearings underway to find out if, you know, what witnesses he'll call, to what extent, how much of it will be public. All of those are crucial questions. You know, the government really just complied with the letter of the law at this point to hold the inquiry, to strike it. We'll see if they comply with the spirit of the law, which is to give transparency to why they needed it.
And Bob, what are your expectations around that? Is this going to be a full inquiry? Are we going to get to the heart of the decision the government made and whether it was appropriate?
Well, one would hope so, but this is not a government known for transparency. It has a well-established record of trying to keep information from the public. This was a prime minister, I should say, who came in promising to reform the Access to Information Act, and it was one of his first broken promises. So I think the jury should be out and wait and see how much information that the government will provide to Justice Rouleau. Look, he's a highly respected jurist, and I'm assuming that he will not take it very nicely if the government tries to withhold information from him.
Yeah, and Bob, do you think that, you know, during the actual lead up to the invoking of the Emergencies Act, while there were people from various levels of government responding to the crisis in Ottawa, there was a lot of jurisdictional issues coming up, even finger pointing. Do you think we're going to see that during the inquiry? Is the government going to shift the focus to the public service and say, hey, it was kind of their call, or, you know, that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, the big problem seemed to be here in Ottawa with the police chief, who was very reluctant to act and enforce the law. And once he was removed, the police were able to be very effective in almost within, as soon as they started, within 24 hours, the hill had been cleaned of these protesters and all these big trucks. And the big issue here is, you know, we didn't need to bring in the Emergency Act to clear the protesters that were at the Ambassador Bridge. And I'm not sure that there is justification for the imposition of the Emergency Act. I think the police probably had the powers that they needed to do the job. They were simply unwilling to do it.
And Tonda, do you think that Justice Rouleau will get access to everything that he needs, documents, witnesses? You touched on this a little bit earlier, but do you think he'll have what he needs to complete the inquiry?
Well, we'll see. Look, there is in all of these inquiries protections for a whole bunch of things. And in a case like this, you know, they've already signaled that cabinet confidentiality won't be waived. But that is actually something that they have in the past chosen to waive, given certain circumstances. Some cabinet confidentiality, for example, was waived around testimony around the SNC-Lavalin affair. Some cabinet confidentiality was waived around the pandemic and documents that were released, government documents that were released to Parliament. You know, in the end, is a paper dump conducive to finding answers? Well, look, if they get good questioning and frank answers from ministers and other people who were involved in advising them, we'll see. But I have my doubts. I think that, like Bob said, this is really one to watch very carefully. The test is, did they Did they have no other choice? Was this a last resort? Were there laws that could have helped them? And to Bob's point, the question around the police leadership in this city in particular, never mind how other blockades were dealt with, but in this city, that's a broader question than just one man. It's a question that goes into a whole bunch of things around city politics, police service board politics. That I'm not sure we'll see all of that explored in a federal inquiry narrowly targeted or focused on the use of the Emergencies Act.
Yeah, great points. And Bob, just a final quick thought on this. There are events playing out in Ottawa as we speak, of course, but I'm assuming that in the future, these kinds of protests are going to be handled a lot differently, and that there's already been a lot of effort that has gone into making sure that what happens this weekend and at future events will not be the same. And I'm guessing we probably even won't get to the brink of considering the Emergencies Act as part of future responses to similar events.
Well, look, once the Ottawa police chief Solely was removed, the police moved very quickly in with a very good plan. I mean, honestly, in within 24 hours of moving, they had cleaned out the downtown core of Ottawa. And that is going to be, I think, probably a test case, a case study for all police forces on how to handle these kind of protests. I mean, there was no police violence. That was all done with remarkable restraint and very, very efficiently done. And it helped, at least in this city, to bring back some respect for law and authority, and particularly the Ottawa police, because the people in this city had really just been up in arms about the fact that these protesters were allowed to have free reign of the downtown core of the city for 3 weeks.
Yeah. All right, let's turn to the Conservative leadership race. And Tonda, earlier this week, of course, former Reform Party leader Preston Manning warned the leadership candidates that personal attacks against each other could end up deepening divisions within the federal Conservative camp. Do you think that's relevant, Tonda? And is Preston Manning still, is he relevant enough for people to heed his words?
I'm not sure. There's a whole generation probably of Conservatives who don't remember him or remember him as sort of maybe a founding father of, a legacy party to the modern day party. But whether his words carry weight with a whole younger generation, I think, look, the cue gets taken from the top, and Pierre Poilievre and Jean Charest and Patrick Brown and all of those folks who are running do know who he is. And they would perhaps do well to heed his warning of the insult and the splits that could result from a very nasty leadership race, and the damage it could do going forward, and how it could be weaponized by their political opponents in a general election campaign and in the lead up to a campaign. Those are words of an elder that I think the leadership candidates themselves might choose to heed. But whether they can control their armies of supporters and what they do on social media and what they do in a campaign race, that's another question. But people take their cues from leaders, and if leaders want to step up, they might be wise to take that advice.
Yeah, Bob, what do you think about that? In the past, there have been divisive leadership campaigns, and people have worried, has this divided the party? Is this going to affect the next federal election? And sometimes it doesn't. It's forgotten by the time the federal election rolls around. But it feels like there's more at stake in this Conservative leadership race in terms of the future of the party.
Well, I mean, first of all, Preston Manning knows what he's talking about, because he destroyed the Progressive Conservative Party by splitting off the Reform Party. And it gave the Liberals basically a good 15 years in power. Because of the actions that he did. We certainly have seen, if you do not get strong leaders, parties can fall apart pretty quickly. We saw that in the period of time after Mr. Chrétien left office, and we saw it during Joe Clark's time when he was a weak leader, and Mr. Mulroney was able to cause a lot of divisions, and it tore the Conservative Party apart. And there is a real threat here that this same thing can happen to in this Conservative race right now between Mr. Poilievre particularly and Mr. Charest and Mr. Brown. I mean, there are things that are being said about all three of those things that are going to make it very, very difficult for the three men to be, let alone get together in the same room, but for their supporters. And you know, the idea of an election campaign is you need the party swinging in the right as a united force if you're going to win. And you know, it's not looking very good right now.
Tonda,
it's almost like I was just going to say it's almost like it's a scorched earth campaign already. You know, this at this early stage, when so many of the preliminary sort of markers haven't been yet met to who's going to be on the final ballot, before even a leadership debate has happened. So yeah, I agree with what Bob said. And I actually don't think that the losers will stick around. Among the front runners who are conducting the campaign in that nasty form right now, I don't think those losers will stick around. Whoever wins, Poilievre might be a question. He might see an opportunity to stick around. But you know, again, I think that it's a word to the wise what Preston Manning released to those candidates this week.
Bob, very quickly, just in the final 30 seconds here, Pierre Poilievre is getting the lion's share of the attention in this campaign, obviously. Does that mean he's winning? Is there room for somebody else to kind of get some attention and get some momentum in this race?
Well, look, he's getting very big crowds, and none of the other leaders are doing that. And one can assume that a lot of these people who are coming out to see him are also buying memberships. And on the basis of what at least I can see, it looks like he's certainly the front runner. But we'll have to determine how effective an organization Mr. Charest has, a ground game in terms of selling memberships, and the same thing for Mr. Brown. And we won't really have a better idea on that until much later on in the campaign.
Yeah, and the last two Conservative leadership races had surprise outcomes, I think it's fair to say. So we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, Tonda, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Have a good weekend, guys.